What's up guys? Welcome to AnimeKouhai. If you'd like to help me out, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel.
As I pondered this, Ruminas provided the answer.
You should always taste the food before serving it to others. It might be poisoned.
So that's what it was. That explains why Shion was mentioning poison testing earlier. In fact, it was a brilliant idea. It wasn't that Shion's sense of taste was off, she was just the worst kind of cook, the kind who never tastes her own food. If she got into the habit of sampling her dishes, she'd naturally become aware of what needed fixing.
As expected, Ruminas, you're truly wise,
I said, genuinely impressed. Ruminas huffed and turned her head, her cheeks slightly pink with embarrassment. While I was pleased to hear that Shion's cooking would finally improve, it wasn't the reason we had come here. Ramirez had reported that the battle between Milam and the Insectar King Zelanus had reached a stalemate. At the same time, Rumina's capital of Rubirius was under attack from the skies by angelic forces. Gopta and the others had been sent to aid Milam, so things seemed under control there for now. With Milam involved, they should be fine unless something totally unexpected happens. On the other hand, Shion and Adelman had been dispatched to support Ruminas, but I couldn't shake the feeling that their battle strength might not be enough. After all, the Holy Knight Order, Rumina's main force, had been sent to the Kingdom of Ingratia along with Hinata, their leader. Ruminas still had the Bloody Knights, a group of powerful vampires, but there were only about 400 of them. The Bloody Knights were individually A-ranked or higher, and some were even on par with lower-tier Demon Lord seeds. The team's overall quality was impressive. However, after hearing that Jahil had been spotted, I couldn't stay calm. So I left the cleanup in the Kingdom of Ingratia to Hinata and Masayuki and rushed here as quickly as I could. Yet, instead of arriving in the midst of a battle, I was led to a room to taste Shion's sweets while waiting for Ruminas. That said, Ruminas appeared within 10 minutes. I was so taken aback by Shion's progress that I ended up spending more time chatting with her. Now that we'd settled all that, it was time to focus on the main issue.
So, how did the fight with the angels go?
They retreated, so there wasn't any significant damage. It seems that attacking this place wasn't really part of the plan.
Ruminas gave me a thorough explanation of what had happened. Apparently, the attack was the result of Jahil's reckless behavior, or as I like to call it, harassment.
We have a long history of conflict. He and I have never gotten along.
Ruminas added. When I asked for more details, she was hesitant, but after I mentioned hearing some of the story from Sylvia-san, she begrudgingly explained. Apparently, Ruminas had someone in her life who could be considered a father figure. Divine Ancestor Twilight Valentine, a legendary being also called the Twilight King. It seems that this Divine Ancestor Twilight was responsible for creating numerous intelligent life forms. Some of the founders of these life forms became known as the Divine Ancestor's High Disciples, with the first being Jahil and the second being Ruminas, as Sylvia-san had informed me. Each of these High Disciples went on to establish their own nations. In Sylvia-san's case, she mostly supported the High Elves, but eventually, her daughter El-Tan, also known as Emperor Elmesia, unified the Elves, thus founding the Sorcerer's Dynasty of Sarian. Interestingly, despite the long time that has passed, Sylvia-san and Ruminas maintained a secret friendship that even El-Tan was unaware of, only Ruminas knew about it.
I didn't think it was my place to interfere with Saryan, but I did offer some help at the beginning.
That's what she told me. Since Sarian was founded over 2,000 years ago, I had no way of knowing if Rumina's story was accurate. However, given the long lifespans of Ruminas and Sylvia-san, they were like walking history books, so I had no reason to doubt them. Believing it was likely true, I listened on. I was told that Ruminas and Sylvia-san were the only two of the Divine Ancestor's disciples still alive. At least, no one else seemed to keep in contact with them. The ancestor of King Gazel, the founder of the High Dwarfs, had long since passed away, and it was believed that the founders of the Fire Spirits, Enki, and the Water Spirits, Siren, had likely met their ends as well. The only ones still around were the High Elves, whose long lives resembled those of spirits. When it came to longevity, the High Humans were perhaps the most noteworthy. This race had been created by inverting the Divine Ancestor's attributes.
I don't love admitting this, but I am somewhat of a replica of the Divine Ancestor. To be precise, I am not truly a vampire, but a high blood. I was born from the Divine Ancestor's blood, while Jahil was formed from his flesh. While he didn't inherit the ability to absorb power from others, Jahil too was nearly immortal.
The Divine Ancestor didn't need food, as he sustained himself by draining the life force of others. He had no obvious weaknesses and represented true immortality. He created two replicas of himself. the high human race that thrived during the day and the vampires who ruled the night. The concept of a race living in the daytime was symbolic. Plants harnessed energy through photosynthesis, while animals sustained themselves by consuming plants. Predators that fed on these animals accumulated energy, and their remains enriched the earth through decomposition. The high humans were given the role of being at the top of this chain. This made them part of the natural order, which meant they were still bound by their lifespan. Jahil, too, was not exempt from this. In a city, the average lifespan for a typical person was about 70 years without the use of magic to extend life. Even though medicine wasn't highly advanced, people still lived longer than expected, thanks to magical remedies for illnesses. In more rural areas or places near monster-filled forests, people's lifespans tended to be shorter. Of course, these estimates didn't take into account deaths caused by disasters. High humans, on the other hand, could live several hundred to nearly 1,000 years, much like the long-eared elves. Their physical strength was on another level compared to modern humans, and with their high resistance to magicules, they were able to effectively manipulate and use them. But even so, as long as their bodies weren't immortal, they were still subject to aging and death. This is why Jahil devised a way to extend his lifespan indefinitely. He called it the secret art of spiritualization. The body was composed of 3 elements: the material body, the spiritual body, and the astral body. If all 3 couldn't be sustained, Jahil decided it was best to retain only the essential parts to maintain his ego. In other words, Jahil managed to convert his physical form into a spiritual body, thus keeping only his spiritual and astral bodies. This allowed Jahil to transform himself into a spiritual being through sheer willpower. Gadra's mystic art, reincarnation, was a dangerous technique because it involved reincarnating the soul while keeping it protected by the astral body. However, the newly obtained body would be entirely one's own, with all experiences and knowledge carried over. Raisin's great secret art, possession, transferred the spiritual and astral bodies into another person's body. While it was a much safer method, the downside was that the body's skills weren't inherited. The mana depended on the new body and could become unstable if not properly transferred. On the other hand, Jahil's secret art of spiritualization was flawless. Since Jahil had fully become a spiritual entity, he could securely and permanently retain all the knowledge, experience, and authority he had gained.
Though he needed to prepare a replacement body, it seems he could use the bodies of his blood relatives as much as he wanted. In this way, Jahil found a way around the issue of his lifespan.
Ruminas said, her voice tinged with bitterness. Indeed, if he had become a spiritual being, it made sense that he was almost immortal. I now realized that's how he managed to take over Footman so effortlessly.
However, in his arrogance, he made a critical mistake.
Ruminas explained that while Jahil was entirely absorbed in his research, those under him, responsible for governing, began to compete for power. This internal strife eventually tore the country apart. The final blow came when they mistakenly summoned the uncontrollable demon, Gi, leading to the nation's downfall.
He hated me for destroying the divine ancestor and harbored deep hostility toward me. I was relieved to think he had perished, never imagining he would survive until now with such overwhelming strength.
That's right, Ruminas had killed her own father, the divine ancestor. This was why Jahil held such a grudge against her. He was certainly a troublesome enemy to be targeted by.
Well, even our Benimaru struggled against him, so he's a serious threat.
As I was giving Ruminas my thoughts, Shion, who had been listening in, cut into the conversation.
Huh? Benimaru lost?
She sounded shocked at the idea that Benimaru had been defeated. Though, I'm sure I had already informed all the top executives about this. Did it slip Shion's mind? Well, that would be typical of her.
He didn't lose.
I quickly corrected her, for Benimaru's sake. In my view, as long as you're still alive, you haven't lost. By that logic, Benimaru won. Though in truth, he merely prolonged the fight. Had it continued, there's no doubt he would have been defeated. Jahil was indeed a formidable foe.
I get it, so Ruminas-sama, who beat that kind of opponent, must be stronger than Benimaru.
That's what I'd been wondering as well. Actually, when comparing Ruminas and Benimaru, I didn't think there was a huge difference in their strength. That's why I rushed over, worried for Ruminas and the others. I, too, wanted to hear how she had managed to fend off Jahil.
Oh, that.
Ruminas began, speaking casually.
You know, I've been through the experience of my city being destroyed by an evil dragon.
I suddenly remembered hearing something like this before, or rather, I had received numerous complaints about it.
When building a city, the first priority is ensuring its security.
I see. That's a very wise approach.
I unintentionally spoke in a polite tone, not hesitating to offer flattery. Ruminas shot me a cold glance, then, appearing to calm down, continued the discussion.
I had set up multiple layers of barriers designed to fend off any threats from evil dragons, and they worked quite effectively.
Now that she mentioned it, I recalled that there were indeed numerous layers of defense barriers in this sacred city. We had been granted access, but no one suspicious could pass through them.
I didn't expect him to be that strong. Jahil was powerful enough to overpower Benimaru, and it seemed he had mastery over his ultimate skill. While he wasn't as formidable as Veldora, I doubted a standard barrier would be enough.
I admitted honestly.
Don't underestimate me.
Ruminas chuckled.
This isn't just any place. It's a sacred land where my followers gather. With their constant stream of faith, it's easy to repel Jahil's power.
Her confidence was clear, and indeed, the outcome supported her claim. But could it really be that simple?
It is theoretically possible by applying the secret of faith and grace
So, Ruminas had taken that concept and turned it into reality. It's both amazing and terrifying. I couldn't even begin to imagine how difficult that would be for someone like me.
It is not something one person can do alone. It requires deep understanding and mutual trust with the believers. It's not something that can be achieved overnight. Do you also desire this ability, Master?
I'm not sure. It's not just about me. Let's put that thought aside for now.
Seal-san seemed content with that answer. To be honest, there are plenty of other projects left untouched, though they could prove useful in many ways. Besides, we're still in the middle of a war, and I can't really afford to focus on anything else right now. I shelved the idea for the time being as something to consider in the future. Now that I understood how Ruminas managed to avoid catastrophe, it didn't mean the overall issue was resolved. In fact, the real challenge was just beginning.
A big thanks to the AnimeKouhai patrons who made this video possible. Jared Bressler, Havox, Speed Saber, Curtis Loban, Judah Herrera, Just a Guy, Miss L.W. Hernandez, Jason Martin, Zach Rosen, Jerry Sladek, Ray Perez, Jay, Donald Williams, Day of Light, John M, Godman Gaming, Markithian Tidwell, Adrian, Kumo, T. Bush, JV, Thomas, Christ, Joshua Cousins, Jose Hernandez, Khalid, Christian Deshazer, Divine C. Harris, Montyboy 98, Ruben, Yuki Iki, Gray, Isaac, Koala King 93, Quilly Buckner, Alver, Darius King, Normal Defate, Vicente Baharias, Joshua Andrade, L, Gary Miles, Dragon Spawn 666, J. Rule, Nate, Leiron Sangkap, Lucas Guet, Jason Martin, Christopher Mash, Charles Bailey, Sky T, Diego Ginoza, Andre Hamilton, Martin Ramos, Guy Ensley, Simon Rode, Emperor WSA, Miko Espinosa, Gobi Lin, Pratik Bandari, Faiz Mansour, Jackson Early, Smexy, Carl Stephen Bernadal, Gareth Hashimoto, Steven Madison, Vasto Lord, Marl Barsha, Ralph Ignacio, Efrain Hernandez, William Locke, Kamal Luke, Jahid Hassan Lipu, Spencer Candila, Ian Sikibiol, Thanacorn Lee Sawat, KACP9R, The Harv, Drayden Yamauchi, Alex Buthanu, Michael Brinkley, Nathan Alexander, Mario Kanoy, Karam Faraj. Thank you so much for helping out. I'll see you guys in the next video.